It's a change of pace, because this presentation, when compared to the one that Uma delivered, is going to be more focused on empirical data that will be presented to you with faces and histories of women and men that produce AI. So before we start, allow me to just introduce you my colleagues at the Deep Lab. I am one of the co-founders of this research program at the Institut Polytechnique de Paris. And what we do, as you can see, is producing a lot of paperwork. Well, it's reports that you can download if you want, but we also do something different. We do an extra effort to present the stories of the men and women that we interview, encounter, and that we meet in our everyday investigations in the form of documentaries. So we do have a sub-program called Deep Lab TV, and we have produced 2 documentaries. The first one is available actually in English with subtitles. It's called Invisibles. And the second one is just out now, In the Belly of AI. And basically, as the second name seems to indicate to you, it is about, going inside and in the back office of AI to show how the sausage is made, if you want. And this is not, this is a way of introducing also the topic of today, because I want to start with addressing what's happening here in Barcelona, what has just happened here in Barcelona, and how that the history of Barcelona moderators interjected our own activity. And this is one way of, entering into the topic of who are the data workers who produce AI, and we will also, of course, address the topic of ChatGPT, because I noticed that we started this conference 50 minutes ago, and we didn't even, you mentioned generative AI, but I don't remember listening to the voice, to the name ChatGPT. Now you will. Okay, now. What happened? When we were here, meaning my colleagues and the French director Henri Poulain, who actually shot and produced the documentary back in 2020, we encountered at the Torre Gloriès a number of moderators that were working for a Facebook subcontractor, and these persons were at the time between 800 and 1,000. I understand that this story is, you're familiar with it, I suspect, and these persons were hired to officially moderate content on Instagram and Facebook. It's more complicated than that, and it turns out that what they were doing was actually producing and filtering data that were used to produce specific types of content management systems and AI. As of then, the firm Meta denied the very existence or minimized the existence of these moderators. In 2021, Mark Zuckerberg was in a Senate hearing in the US, and he said that moderation is 98% automated on Facebook. And this is a recurring claim, the fact of insisting on how much automation goes into it and minimizing the actual human contribution. The fact is that it turned out that when our documentary was already out, it was already launched, that the Facebook files, which was a big leak of Facebook internal document, attested the existence of 45 such teams of, 1,000 strong, or even more in some countries, of moderators. They were scattered all over the world. They were in Malaysia and in the Philippines and in Ireland and, of course, in Barcelona and in many other places. And this is something that is important because this is not a small phenomenon. And this is a phenomenon that, again, is just one way of presenting what people do when producing specific types of AI. Now, fast forward to 2025. In 2025, officially, in his new pro-Trump divorcee guy persona, Mark Zuckerberg, went online at the beginning of the year and declared that moderation, as we know it, is over. This is the end of moderation. It was presented as such in the Wall Street Journal the next day, and he said that we're going to now switch to entirely automated and with a little bit of community notes moderation. So it's a new mode that basically not only gets rid of fact-checking and other inconveniences for the new Trump administration, but also is one way of saying that we have reached such a level of perfection in the moderation that we can get rid of the moderators. The actual problem and the actual reason that eventually determined this year the fact that the operations in Barcelona were shut down was not because everything was automated, but because Catalan and Spanish courts of law have been on Facebook as for a number of years. A number of lawsuits have been introduced, lawsuits where workers presented their working conditions and the type of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, they were exposed to, and insisted on wage discrimination according to the different countries of Europe they were coming from, and especially there was a very strong case for discrimination against people from South America, and the Spanish courts have been consistently ruling in favor of Facebook moderators. This is something that, again, allows us to say that what Meta presents today as automation of moderation is actually just offshoring, because, and this is something that has been going on for a number of years, whenever they shut down an operation in a country, they tend to move to another country where a couple of factors or conditions are met. The first one, having people who speak Spanish. So luckily for them, there's a bunch of countries where Spanish is spoken and where on the one side, the cost of labor is not as high as in Europe, and subsequently, and again, when the labor laws are, let's say, more interesting and allow less stringent and allow some kind of optimization. Now, this is something that has been going on in the last couple of years. So whenever they shut down an operation like the one in Barcelona, Meta has been outsourcing and offshoring this kind of labor to countries in Africa and Latin America. The main countries are Colombia, and then, of course, Kenya, Ghana, and Uganda. In Africa. And this is something that we have met, again, these are workers that were moderating when we started doing our second documentary, the one that is called In the Belly of AI, and that is out now, where we went to Nairobi and in rather challenging conditions. I'm talking about, police showing up whenever we try to interview people, stuff like that, so unpleasant stuff like that. Well, we managed to interview a number of moderators, but the situation or their work, their activity itself had changed over the years. Not because automation was there, but because now they were paid to moderate not content, but to moderate data that were used to train AI. And this was rather clear to them. I wanted to show you actually them working, them explaining this to you, but unfortunately for cybersecurity reasons, we are not allowed to show you videos here and to connect to the internet most precisely. Anyway, now in Nairobi, in Kenya, and in other parts of the world, in 2025, moderators not only moderate content, but they work also for big AI companies. Here is the moment where OpenAI is named. OpenAI is one of the main culprit and one of the main employers of these moderators. And their work has morphed into something different, in something that is more aptly described with the qualifier data work, because this is what they do. They analyze content that is basically used as data to train or to fine-tune AI models. So in this case, moderation in 2025 does not consist in removing content, but actually in teaching machines to ignore certain types of content. These content are not removed at all. They are still in the database, but they are flagged or tagged with a specific label that basically says to the AI model, do not learn from this. Call it, for instance, machine unlearning, if you want. Anyway, this allows us to morph or to transition to the ChatGPT case, because the ChatGPT case is a fascinating case of data work that has to do, and it was attested rather quickly, with moderation, but that allows us to actually introduce you, to allow you to meet the data workers. The ChatGPT case is fascinating. If you remember, in November 2022, it was launched, ChatGPT, and 2 months afterwards, Time magazine had this scathing expose that you see there, where they revealed that several hundred workers in Kenya were paid as little as $1.34 per hour to annotate data and to go through very toxic and problematic content, again, to teach ChatGPT not to say those words or tackle that issue, and so on and so on. So filtering content was a main characteristic of their activity, and the question that soon arose at the time, and we are still trying to provide replies to it, is what if, like we discovered in 2020 and 21, that Facebook did not have only one moderation operation in Barcelona, but had, dozens of them scattered all over the world? What if now we can demonstrate that we have data annotators that are working on ChatGPT all over the world? So what if OpenAI basically is just pulling a meta, as we say in the sector? Well, the secret is in the very name GPT, which is the underlying model. G stands for generative. This is what it does. It generates texts and images and now videos. Then there is the P, pre-trained, as you can quickly see by the fact that I have highlighted it in bold. It is the word that does much of the legwork here, and we will come back in a minute, and then T, which stands for transformer. This is the type of AI model. So pre-trained is the central word and the central qualifier here. These are models that have been trained in the past. What does it mean to pre-train a model? Well, according to, now let's first answer to this. Training a model basically means teaching the model, teaching the machine learning model to predict based on data that they have been using as examples. Where is ChatGPT pre-trained according to OpenAI? According to OpenAI, they did have, of course, a pre-training operation in Kenya, and then another one in South Africa, and then another one in England, and one in Turkey, and one in India. All these logos that you see are the different platforms that were actually used by workers to connect and to pre-train the model. And this is also where the workers were recruited. But then we also have workers recruited in the US and Canada and the Philippines. Okay, so it's a complicated geography that basically, pushes us to ask some more questions. Is basically this geography determined by the fact that ChatGPT is pre-trained in the countries where we have data centers? Not exactly, because if we look at the countries where data centers are located, the majority of those, they are vastly concentrated, largely concentrated in the global north. But when it comes to asking the other questions, is ChatGPT trained where data workers are? Well, we do have, based on our own research that has been going on for 6 years now, we don't do only documentaries, we also do collect, data and interview thousands of people. And we've been in over 30 countries, and the geography of data data work and the geography of AI training seem to be more in tune here, more aligned. So it's going back and forth between the north and the south, but a lot of this work and a lot of this training is and has been happening in the global south. So it's time to meet the data workers, because we not only interview them, but we also invite them to come meet the policymakers in hope that some kind of dialogue is established, and that people who actually, for instance, this was at the European Parliament last year. We organized 2 events where data workers were invited to tell their stories and have their voices heard, and they came from places like Venezuela, Iran, Syria, Azerbaijan, or Kenya, Nigeria. So again, not exactly the Silicon Valley types. We are not talking about people who are recognized or paid as engineers or software developers. These are data annotators that, again, are paid very little and that are usually described as the invisible data workers. I'm guilty here because our own documentary back in 2020 was called Invisibles. But they are not invisibles. When we go where they are, in this case, this is Antananarivo in Madagascar, and I was there in 2022 and 23 at 6 o'clock at the end of the day. This is what you see. These are people going back home after a hard day's work as data workers, to call it the happy hour of the data workers. So sometimes they work in places like this. So this is typical, open floor with hundreds of computers, and each one of them has their own computer, and usually there are very strict rules in terms of confidentiality. They have to leave their smartphones at the entrance. They are not allowed to speak to anybody about what they do. But sometimes they work from home. They connect to easily available platforms such as Amazon Mechanical Turk or Remotask. Now Remotask is called Outlier. Probably you have heard those kind of platforms, and they perform tasks all day. In this case, this was a picture that a PhD student of mine took of a small, very informal operation of 2 twin brothers, who had one computer, one room. It was their bedroom, and they created their small firm, call it like this, like 5 persons, like their cousins and people from the neighborhood, that would take turns performing tasks on these. Well, as you can see, that's a typical gamer teenager computer. Not a lot in terms of technical aspects, and in some cases even more informal. I have personally observed people performing this kind of data tasks in places like these cyber cafes. There were people, replying to their emails, and there were people earning a little money And but clearly the most common case for us, at least, this is kind of semi-formal operations like the one that you see here. This is a house that has been transformed into a data factory. And each room of this house has several computers and 20 to 30 people working in each house. So, in each room, sorry. And when I say that they are poorly paid, well, if you go to Kenya, they can be paid up to the equivalent of $400 per month, which again is not a lot. It's not enough to live in a place like Nairobi. If you go to Madagascar, they are paid around $100 per, well, a little more than that, 120 per month. Again, not enough to live in a big city, especially if you have a family, which explains why these people are usually young and do not have families. But sometimes their compensation completely skips the monetary part, like it is attested by this dashboard, of which I took a picture in 2023. This was a company that was producing, let me be vague, something that had to do with ChatGPT, some kind of distillation or sub-GPT. But despite the fact that the owners declared that these people were paid 120 euros per month, what we observed at the very entrance of this company was this kind of strange meter. Let me explain what this is, this picture. This is a meter that basically connects each level of performance by the worker with specific types of compensation. And for those of you who are, have good eyesight, but also are able to translate from Malagasy French, you will notice that they are paid 1 kilogram of sugar if they are at the first level. Second level is 1 kilogram of beans. Third level, 5 kilograms of rice, 25 kilograms of rice, and so on and so on. So we are talking about people that sometimes are paid in kind. So talk about decent work, not decent at all. Okay, now allow me to just provide you a couple of let's say, more theoretical aspects of it, and then we will skip to the final part of this presentation. First of all, how do we make sense of what I just presented? Because it's a lot of information and seems to be rather scattered. Well, luckily for you, we have been using and developing this scheme, which is called the PVI model. The PVI model allows us to know what kind of data work is performed by human workers behind AI. And basically, there are three types of activities. The first one is AI preparation. This is where the pre-training of ChatGPT usually takes shape, but there's a lot of data generation too. You also have to do a lot of data entry. It's not only a matter of pre-training. So you have to produce the data and then teach the machine to recognize it. So there is also another phase that is called AI validation. Validation this is usually where moderation takes place. You do have a functioning product that is already launched on the market, but you want to make sure that this product is used properly or works properly. ChatGPT, you don't want it to hallucinate or to produce something potentially dangerous or illegal. So you need human validation. And there's a lot of it. And then finally, this is something that Uma hinted. We also work on a third phase that is called AI impersonation. Uma Rani herself has co-authored a very good chapter on the AI impersonation. How do you call it? Deceptive AI, right? So this is the one way of saying it. Sometimes we as users deal with AI systems that give us the illusion of being entirely automated, and then we discover that they are not automated at all or not entirely. So let me introduce you a couple of examples for each one of these phases, and then for each one of these phases show you what's the geography behind this kind of data work. So AI preparation, we said. Okay, this is an example which is rather crass, but I'm pretty sure that you will remember it. This is a person that we interviewed in Brazil in 2023. And this person was doing a certain type of data preparation, which, I mean, I would not recommend it to anybody. Talk about toxic job. Her job consisted in taking pictures of dogs' excrement. To do what? To train a specific type of AI. Not a generative AI per se, but an AI that was used to activate and operate a robot vacuum cleaner. A robot vacuum cleaner has to rely on an AI model of computer vision that basically detects obstacles and avoid them. And dog poop is an obstacle that you want to avoid. So somebody has to do the uncomfortable job of producing this kind of images and taking pictures and be paid very poorly for that, and then upload these pictures in a database, and the database is now used to train this little vacuum cleaner. Right. So what does it mean in terms of the geography of it? Well, we do have a company that is based in the US that produces the AI and the vacuum cleaner. They recruit people in Brazil, and the people in Brazil just produce the data and send the data to the US. Pretty straightforward, right? Now, things get complicated when we move to AI verification. AI verification, well, a good example is this one, is the person that we interviewed back in 2019, pre-COVID times, but again, it's significant in a way. And this person was paid to check if one specific type of AI, which was a voice assistant, it was Cortana by Microsoft, was interpreting correctly what people were saying. And she would receive hundreds of snippets of conversation. Think about like 5 seconds snippets of conversation. She will listen to the audio and she would check if the transcription was correct. Okay. What does it give in terms of the supply chain of this? We do have a company that is based in the US, Microsoft. This company outsources to a Chinese platform the recruitment of people. The Chinese platform subcontracts to a Japanese platform, which in turn subcontracts to Spanish platforms, which in turn recruits the people in France, and the people in France produce the data, and those data are sent to the US. Right? So it's the war tour just to make a stupid Cortana voice assistant work. Anyway. And then we've moved to the final example, the example of AI impersonation. Again, in some cases, it's a matter of deception. In some cases, it's more systemic than that. Some colleagues call this heteromation, which is the reverse of automation, right? So somebody's doing the automation for you. Let me give you this example that will make it clear for you. This is a company, a European company that produces a specific type of AI that activates and operates a surveillance camera, an intelligent surveillance camera that is deployed in supermarkets. So this is the camera that not only detects the human shape, but also interprets human behavior. And it's capable of understanding if somebody is just looking at their phone, so something rectangular and black, or stealing a chocolate bar, something rectangular and black. You know, it's not easy. It's not very easy because it's a complicated task. So it relies on a very complex algorithm. And this complex algorithm, I will now show it to you. And it's basically 120 persons in Tananarivo, Madagascar. Again, we're back in Africa. And these 120 persons are all stuffed in one house. There is one bathroom and no garbage disposal. Each one had to, go out every day and burn the garbage in the garden. We spent 1 week with them, so we could actually observe how they were working and from where they were working. Some were actually working from the garage, and they were pretty adamant about the fact they knew that they were doing some fake AI. They were saying, we are just, in French they say the vigile, which means security agents for a supermarket, but we are doing it remotely. And what does it give in terms of the supply chain? So we do have a company that is based in Europe, and the company in Europe sends a stream of video feeds. So it's a live feed from supermarkets to Madagascar. There is no pre-training here. This is happening live. And the people in Madagascar send back the reply, somebody is stealing or not stealing. If they are stealing, they send an automated text, automated brackets, quote unquote automated, to the cashier or to the owner of the shop. And this has been going on for 5 years. When we observed it back in 2022, they never actually developed an actual algorithm. So they basically made the assessment that going on paying people in Madagascar was less costly than actually developing an AI. So AI impersonation in this case is pretty clear. So let me finish with this final presentation of the geography of data work for AI as of today, 2025. And this is based not only on our own data, but also on the data that, among other things, Umarani and her teams, plural, because she did several times collected at the ILO, and then our colleagues at the OII, the Oxford Internet Institute, and our colleagues in Hangzhou, in China, because you will see all these countries that have some kind of specific pattern to them are countries on which we have data so far. So what do we know based on the data that we have? We know that there are four main fluxes, so four main flows of data work for AI. The first flow goes from east to west. Well, okay, first of all, these are the countries where companies that produce and market AI solutions are based, right? The first flow goes from the Philippines and India and Bangladesh to the US. This is the one that has been attested for longer. We do have data that dates back to 2020, 2012, 2013 that attest the existence of these workers. And this, again, is where the first Facebook moderators were discovered, well, in the case of Hyderabad and Bangalore in India, is where people that were training the first Google self-driving cars were based, and so on and so on. Okay. Then there is the Chinese flow, which is a specific one, because China relies on Southeast Asia, as their colleagues in the US do. So a lot of Chinese-speaking workers in communities in Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore are producing data for Chinese companies. But China also has a humongous internal market for data workers. If you need people who work, well, you can go to China, and the Chinese government knows very well. And this is why they have been trying to successfully put in place a lot of poverty alleviation programs that recruit people in what they call tier 3 cities, meaning cities that are, well, full of people, but with a lower GDP, and this is where they recruit the data workers that produce the data for cheap for companies that are the DeepSeek or Tencent that are usually based in the coastal towns or more on the east, like Hangzhou, Shanghai, Shenzhen, and so on and so on. Okay. And then we do have the Latin American flow. This is something that is probably relevant to you here in Spain. The flow is double. There is, first of all, the people in Argentina, Venezuela, that produce data for AI, and Brazil, of course, yeah, we mentioned it, produce data for AI companies in the US. It's kind of the Monroe Doctrine, but for data. And then we do have a lot of people, especially in places like Colombia and Venezuela, that produce data for companies that are based in Europe and, worryingly, since 2022, in Russia. And then we do have the final flow, which is the triple African flow, the famous triple African flow. I mean, famous to us, but probably not to you. Anyway, it's triple because it depends on the language spoken in each country. And, of course, it relies on the colonial history of these countries. The first one is, of course, the one that starts in places like Kenya, English-speaking countries, Nigeria, and this is where usually the annotators for OpenAI are recruited still nowadays, or for Meta. Meta too produces generative AI now. Then there is, of course, the French-speaking part. So it is basically Madagascar, Côte d'Ivoire, Cameroon, Senegal, and so on and so on. They produce data for the French. And then there is a final one. This is countries like Egypt. I was in Egypt in 2020 during the COVID outburst. And we were made aware, and we interviewed a few people that were working for companies that produce data for face recognition algorithms and AI solutions in China. So people recruited in Egypt, in Cairo, to recognize faces of Chinese citizens. And well, that is basically it. This, I hope, will stimulate a few questions. And I want to finish with not self-promotion, but other promotion, because with a number of people, including the ILO, we organize every year a conference, and you are really strongly invited, if you work on these topics, to submit your own presentation. The next one is not far from here. It's going to be in Bologna. It's going to be in September. The name of the initiative is called INDL, International Network on Digital Labor. And this time, the edition is devoted to contesting digital labor, resistant counter uses and new directions for research. So if you work on social dialogue and how unions and workers organize, this is the place where we really think your presentation would shine. Thank you very much.
So we have a couple of minutes before the coffee break for some Q&A. If someone has questions or comments they would like to address, Antonio. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor. I'm just out of curiosity. These data are real data or artificial data?
They are real data insofar they are used to. You mean data collected from human beings and human users? Yes. Yeah. Yes.
They don't produce artificial data, and they train artificial data.
This is the typical question that we receive in 2025, because another, let's say, piece of this information is that now everything is data produced by other AI systems. Okay, let's say the breaking news is that artificial data do not work to produce actual AI systems today. This has been demonstrated. Science published a study a few months ago that attested that if you feed an AI system with artificial data, you are in a scenario that we can describe as like the equivalent of the mad cow disease for AI. You know, mad cow was provoked by cows that were fed other cows, to increase their protein intake. And this is basically what happens with AI. That basically models poison themselves and enter in some kind of self-reinforcement loop that we want to avoid, because AI systems are based on aligning the what AI does with the actual human behavior. And if you do not have data that are based on human behavior, your AI system will not work.
Okay. Is there another question or comment? Okay, we can collect maybe these two. Thank you.
So, good morning. First of all, I would like to thank both Professor Rani and Professor Casilli, for the insightful presentations. And in my case, I would like to answer if should we have some sort of hope to an AI ethical developing, and if so, if you know like any initiatives on this regard.
Okay, so you said you want an answer? No, you want to ask.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, yeah. I am not a fan of the ethical AI trend. I think that in many cases, ethical AI is just a label that is used to do some ethical washing by AI companies that know very, very well that they are doing something dangerous, and that they use the moniker ethical AI because they want to avoid stringent regulation. This is the present situation. I mean, if you have companies like Palantir, which is one of the worst warmongers and surveillance vendors in the world, that describes itself as ethical because it just defends, I don't know, US interests against enemies, I don't think that this is ethical. But they describe themselves as an ethical company. And this has to do, well, again, so one may say there is a lot of hypocrisy surrounding that. But some companies are actually trying to walk the walk and trying to do something different. My point is that we can assess the actual ethical nature of an AI operation or an AI initiative if we know in a transparent way how this AI is produced, right? So, in my opinion, an AI can be described as ethical if, for instance, they exert a certain level of due diligence all throughout the supply chain. And this is unfortunately not yet the case. These companies try to conceal this work. This is why it is described as invisible. It is not invisible per se. It is invisible because it is concealed by these companies for industrial secrecy reasons or competition reasons, or in some cases because they want to escape regulation. Because imagine if, I don't know, OpenAI was responsible for treating the Kenyan workers the same way they treat the US workers. If they were to apply, for instance, the California labor law in a place like Nairobi and start paying them like they pay the people that they employ in Palo Alto or in the Silicon Valley and other places, this would completely, screw up their own supply chain, because the supply chain is predicated on, some people are on the receiving end and are on the losing end of it. And the losing end of it means that they have poor working conditions, poor compensations, and they are unrecognized. And this is, in my opinion, the ethical challenge that this company have to tackle and that they do not tackle as of today.
Uma, do you want to?
To just agree with what Antonio says and take it a bit more forward and say that I think what you're asking is something that will end up like corporate social responsibility, which we all know in that world, that you do everything bad, but then you put in a little bit of money. And I think just like the greenwashing, this will become ethical washing. I think what you need is very clearly auditing of the entire AI development. And number two, what you need is also, you talk about AI acts about deployment of AI. And I think what we need is also some sort of regulation about development of AI per se. Because, what are certain principles that need to be put in place to ensure that the development of AI does not entail exploitation of the workers around the world. And it is around the world because you also have refugees in the global north who are engaged in this kind of work. It's not just the global south workers. So I think it's very fundamental and important for us to have transparency as well as AI auditing at different stage. The second thing that is fundamental for it is also ensuring the investment, venture capital investments that go on. If you really look at how investments are made today, you just have a piece of paper, not tested, not tried. You come up with an idea, and of course, you have a couple of 2 or 3 youngsters sitting in a San Francisco apartment, actually starting it up themselves and then completely outsourcing to a whole lot of human laborers around the world. So I think there also needs to be some sort of regulatory checks right there about where's the capital investment going? Where's this venture capital investment going? Whether it's a SoftBank or other guys who are coming in. So those regulations need to be tightened to ensure that AI development happens in a fair and for equitable reasons. Thanks.
I apologize, but my English is very bad. I don't know if I can make the question in French or in Spanish.
Yeah. You can do it.
Yes, it's for the Professor Casilli. En español, en francés, sí. Me gustaría que pudiese hacer un comentario como mínimo hasta qué punto las empresas de desarrollo de IA aprovechan precisamente situaciones de especial vulnerabilidad, ¿no? Además de estos desequilibrios norte-sur, situaciones concretas de especial vulnerabilidad. Las refugiadas de Venezuela, personas migrantes en Nairobi, por ejemplo, estudiantes, presos, cómo, además de ese desequilibrio norte-sur, aprovechan estas situaciones.
Yes.
Muchas gracias.
Okay. I hope that the question was not in terms of how they are helping this vulnerable population, because unfortunately it turns out that based on our data they are relying on them and putting them to work without compensating them and recognizing and doing anything to improve their actual condition. This is something that, again, Uma just introduced. Well, let's start with the refugees. And I would even make let's say, open up the question even more, or the answer even more, to say that there is a link between migration and this kind of labor. There is an argument to be made, and I try to make it in my latest book, that even the people who are working from remotely from the global south for northern AI developing companies are remote workers, meaning remote migrants, meaning migrants that are not allowed to migrate to the country where they would actually be hired and be recognized, and so on and so on. And this has to do with the horrifying scenario that we see in terms of repression of migration. Now, this intersects our own data. When we did in 2024 our latest European survey of data workers, one of the most striking results was that 21% of them were migrants. And again, you will say, oh, it's not a lot. Well, it's 2 to 3 times more than the number of the proportion of migrants in the general population for the countries that were surveyed. And more importantly, this kind of migrations did not happen randomly. People that were working for data working companies in Portugal and Spain came from South America. People who were working for data working platforms in France came from Africa. And people who were working in Germany came from Asia, well, mainly Turkey. So you see that there is kind of an overlapping between the migration trajectories and the actual trajectories of data work. So this allows us to basically introduce the topic of what about migrations even in the global south? When you go to Kenya, the people who are doing this data work come from Nigeria, Zimbabwe, Ghana, and, surrounding countries. They are invited to work, especially for one of those companies who was particularly pointed out for their bad practices. They are invited to move to Nairobi with a humanitarian contract. They are presented as working for an NGO, and then they discover that they're gonna moderate or annotate images of decapitations and rape. Then the other point is that they are denied some basic human rights in terms, for instance, of moving back to their own countries or having their identity recognized in the country of migration. And Well, and this is just to provide you one example, but there are many others. Venezuelan migrants in Colombia are another egregious case of a number of violations in terms of human rights and labor rights, of course. And then, of course, there is, you mentioned los presos, which I understand are people who are imprisoned. So imprisoned population is another important in terms of sizable part of this workforce. In the documentary In the Belly of AI, we document the existence of people in Finland, women in Finland, who are paid very poorly, like €2 per day, to do data annotation for AI. Why? Well, because in Finland, you will not find a lot of people who are ready to work for $1.35 or $2 per day. The only people who are deprived of their own freedom, that they do not have any other alternative. So women in a women's prison, or another case that we document in that documentary is Ukrainian refugees in Bulgaria. Again, people who escaped war and through a humanitarian program were allowed to move outside, but the only possibilities in terms of access to the labor market is that. So there are a number of data that attest this kind of situations, unfortunately.
And is this really necessary to do this pruning with the data?
Necessary to what?
Do the pruning with the data or the training? Is this really necessary?
It is not only necessary, but increasingly necessary. This is counterintuitive because, again, we think that, okay, eventually we will pre-train everything and everything will be ready to work. This, this is not exactly what's happening. This is not at all what's happening, actually. Whenever you introduce a new AI, you need to verify and maintain that AI. So pre-training is only one initial part. Then you have to retrain, fine-tune, update, introduce new features, make this I don't know, ChatGPT speak new languages, and so on and so on. So it's a lot of data work that goes into an increasing number of data workers. Again, this is a matter of controversy actually between me and Uma, is how many people are actually working around the world doing this kind of things. Okay, there are some estimates that we both do not believe in that talk about hundreds. The World Bank published like 435 million people around the world. Okay, even if we do not believe in those assessments and estimates, the only thing that we have noticed is that over the last 10 years, the number has been increasing. So we would expect that, again, AI improving meant that data work is decreasing, not at all.
To what Antonio is saying, comes also from the question that you have. Antonio talked about the Facebook CEO saying everything is automated. In 2017, YouTube CEO went viral saying 95% of the content on YouTube is automated. But he failed to say that because the 5% is not done, and the new material that keeps coming in, that needs to be again verified and checked. So, everything goes through moderation and checking. So this is a never-ending thing. It's not that it will happen today and tomorrow you don't need to. So, this myth that we all have that AI happens by algorithms is what I think all the research that we are all doing and trying to present is to demystify that. There are two more points that I do want to raise. Antonio very nicely talked about how within Kenya, in Nairobi, you're not talking just about the Nairobi workers, but you have workers from all around. Why do they get those workers? One is it's not the country, and they can't get into organizing, unionizing, or fighting for their rights. There's a reason why. The strategy of these firms is super interesting to think about. The second thing that we have come across in our research is that, this is a question I keep having all the time, saying, why are workers working in it if they know? They never know that this is a work they will do. When they do annotation for those driverless cars, they are told in the interviews or when the job comes out that they will become data analysts. The entire interview is about computer science, okay, what they have learned. They get into the job, it has nothing to do with what they know. All they're doing is data labeling, data categorizing, data annotating. Again, with content moderation, how are they recruited? The recruitment talks about translation. They come in to do the interview on translation, everything. The work has nothing to do with it. And even the training, during the training, they sign what is called as the NDA, the non-disclosure agreement, all of these workers. So they can't disclose the work they do to their families, to their friends, or to anybody else. So, the entire psychological stress that these workers have, they put it themselves, has huge health impacts on them. They can't leave the job because the family is like, why are you leaving this job? There are no jobs that are there. Why can't you work? Why don't you continue? So, these are the realities in which AI development is happening. And I think part of this research, it looks more like an investigative journalism in a way. But this is very fundamental and important because many people around the world do not know, including in my own organization, did not know that AI development entails millions of workers actually behind the scenes pumping in and developing it. Thanks.
We will collect 2 more questions here in the front and then in the back.
Well, thank you very much, Uma and Antonio, for your very challenging presentations. I have a question, I guess, for Antonio, but perhaps you also, Uma, can answer, I'm sure. It's about the 2024 directive on corporate due diligence. This directive aims to ensure that companies operating in the European internal market adopt measures to prevent, to mitigate the negative human rights impacts connected with their operations and the operations of the business partners in the chain of activities, in the chain of supply. Although the directive does not address specifically the outsourcing of these digital activities, do you think the directive could be useful in protecting workers that are working in third countries? Thank you.
Then we collect another question too, and we try to group.
Yeah, let's collect the other question.
Thank you very much, both of you, for your presentations. Uma just mentioned unionization, and I wanted to ask both of you if in your investigations you had which level or have you found any level of worker organization among data workers? Thank you.
If we can keep it brief.
A quick question about, so the maps you showed that looks a lot like, a supply chain, and what we see maybe in other industries like garment industry, right? So where they, they sit in Milan and they say design in Milan, but then it's now produced. So do you see differences or significant differences with other industries? Because right. So, and then if there are different ways, maybe how to tackle this, or maybe we can learn from other industry how they tackle it in the past. Thank you.
Well, I mean, I can try to reply to the Raquel's one and Matteo, right? Okay, right. So the Corporate Due Diligence Directive is, in my opinion, an excellent instrument to tackle the situation that I presented. There are a couple of problems, and the first one is the impending doom of the Omnibus Directive that will probably completely, cut out whatever edge the corporate due diligence had. But it's clear that there is no language in that directive that specifically addresses outsourcing of data work. But this is also due to the fact that almost at the same time, at the European level, the Platform Work Directive was discussed, and the decision, to my knowledge, was that the labor aspects of it would be addressed in the platform work, which admittedly do not talk about outsourcing in other continents, and the corporate due diligence would concentrate on, use the language of corporate due diligence again. We are already, meaning me and my research team, Deep Lab, and a French NGO, we are already trying to leverage this. We published a report back in 2023 about it. We are meeting a number of companies that are at least interested in doing the right thing when it comes to this. I suspect that if the Omnibus Directive comes into effect, they will immediately stop worrying about this. But as of today, there is clearly some wiggle room to address it using the Corporate Due Diligence Directive, in my opinion. And this has to do with, again, the fact that there are some lessons to be drawn from the previous struggles and experiences in other sectors. Of course, food, garment, the mining industry. These are a number of sectors that have distinctive pattern when it comes to their supply chain that look a lot like the one that we should. And there are some reasons for this. And one of the main reasons is that usually the countries where already there was an infrastructure for outsourcing back in the call center days or teleservices day or garment day and so on, they never stopped, to be frank, but they are leveraging the same infrastructure, which means sometimes good connectivity, well-educated workers, highly educated workforce, and tax optimization strategies that create in some of these countries what they call, in an intriguing way, white zones, meaning for whites, to go and exploit the non-whites. And this is some kind of things that is also attested by the fact that, there are some let's say, overlapping also in terms of these AI operation and other types of operation. For instance, one of the hypotheses we're working on with some difficulty, because not a lot of people want to fund this kind of research, is establishing the links between AI production in terms of data and mineral extraction for AI. If you go to, again, Madagascar, we interviewed hundreds of people who do data work in Antananarivo. You move 90 kilometers away, and there is one of the biggest nickel and cobalt mines in the entire continent, which, as you know, is used for batteries, for instance. Or in, Argentina, or in Bolivia, we interview people, and then we interview people who do data work, and then you move a few kilometers north or south, and you bump into the triangle of lithium, which again is very important for the development of any device that contain AI. So this is something that needs to be explored because the overlapping of the supply chain will not only teach us lessons in terms of how do we get out of this situation, but also show that this overlapping points towards an ongoing double or triple exploitation. People that are countries that from which companies extract not only data but also minerals, food, and any other resource.
I just want to first take on what you said. Very clearly, there are parallels and something that we often talk about between the garment industry as well as the data work industry. But I think one of the biggest differences that you see is when you talked about the garment workers, they were very lowly educated and they were either illiterate or had primary education. But today when you talk about data workers, you're talking about very highly educated workers, of course, in STEM education and all of it. I think what would be very interesting at the international level is to think about international framework of agreements in a way which is cross-border and ensures that the lead firms have a responsibilities over the entire supply chain. And that's where, for me, the whole question of audits come into place. What are you doing where and how are you basically developing? We do have the global supply chain discussion within the ILO, and that's something that's not been resolved yet. And I think this adds a further complexity within that discussion, and we need to see how to take it forward. And this hasn't come up to that radar yet. And what we're trying to do is develop this research a bit more to get people's attention, and especially the policymakers' attention, to make them realize what is this AI development that is happening. I think the kind of surprise that we got from this room is something we keep getting all the time, whether it's Antonio presenting or me presenting anywhere. So there is still a lack of understanding of what's behind the scene. With regard to unionization, I thought Antonio would talk about it because he's been quite involved with the Content Moderators Workers Union in Kenya, which has come up, and it's been started by people who actually were laid off because they came out in public and talked about their issues, and we're trying to see how to actually support them and to get their voices out and to get other workers engaged. It's not an easy arena or an area, because at the minute you're part of any of this union movement, you're immediately laid off. That's basically the whole violation of the non-disclosure agreement to the whole thing. So, how do you tactfully handle it, and how to get the other unions engaged in it is also an issue we are trying to deal with and to get them involved. But surely this is a space that we need to work around. And I'd just like to also advertise another documentary that was made way back in 2019, if I'm not wrong, or 2018, called as Content Moderators by two Germans in Philippines. And that actually captures very clearly the work that it entails. And, the reason why there's a call for attention on these big tech companies about how you cannot exploit labor from the global south or the refugees in the global north to do this work. And I think we need to really re-question what is the kind of AI we want? What is the kind of web we want, or what is the kind of social media we want? I think this also comes from the consumer side of the game. And I think there's a lot more thinking around that needs to be done too. Thanks a lot.